Hi everyone. There was a few technical difficulties this morning, which meant that the recording didn't actually save. So I thought I'd just come back on, redo the presentation, so at least everyone gets a copy, particularly those that weren't able to attend this morning's workshop. So let's jump into it. All right. So for those that I didn't meet this morning, my name is Michael Wassertheil. I'm an accredited practicing dietitian. A bit about today's workshop or presentation, I should say. I'll be self-indulgent and talk about myself for a little bit. We'll talk about some sports nutrition principles, fueling, carbohydrates, all the good stuff. We'll discuss hydration practices, the idea of practice being made perfect, my experiences during the London Marathon, and then I'll offer some top tips, and then we typically would have given the opportunity for a Q&A, but for those that might have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. All my contact details can be found within there. Once again, sincerely apologise for not being able to be there in person this morning. We had this penciled in, Anna and I, in the diary for a number of months, but I needed to stay in Melbourne this weekend to be with my family. Nonetheless, nutrition and running are two of my biggest passions. So I really love discussing this concept as well. For those that weren't familiar, I'm actually training for the Chicago Marathon, so I can't wait to achieve or be a part of what we're all about to achieve in a few months' time. The thing being both a marathon runner and a sports dietitian is I really like to offer as much value as possible in this space. So yeah, if you do have a question at the end of this presentation, feel free to reach out to me on the contact details provided in the Q&A. A few disclaimers. Number one, for individualized nutritional advice, please contact an accredited practicing dietitian or an accredited sports dietitian. The information that I provide today is very generic, and anything that is more nuanced should be best discussed with an accredited practicing dietitian or accredited sports dietitian specifically. And also, I don't receive any money to promote any supplements or products. And I think that's really important to disclose as we start talking about ways to benefit health and performance, and that idea that, people's opinions might not necessarily be bought, but it's purely based on science. So important to mention those two disclaimers. Fully aware there might not be too many people that know exactly who I am. So my name is Michael. I've completed previously a Bachelor of Exercise Science and a Master of Dietetics. In terms of professional experience, I've worked at the Sydney Swans for 12 years, I believe now. I was also part of the Melbourne City program, which enabled me to work with a number of Socceroos and Matildas players. I also run my own private practice where I deal with a lot in the health and performance space. And I'm also currently tutoring at the University of Melbourne, which I've just absolutely loved doing over the last couple of years. We obviously won't talk about the result again between Port Adelaide and Sydney last night. But I have worked with the football club for a number of years in a variety of different roles. This photo was taken in 2021 during the second year of the COVID hub. And I was, very fortunate enough to be invited into the AFL hub and be the on-site dietitian for the Swans. So I absolutely loved that, despite everything else that was going on in the world. I've shown this photo a lot over the last sort of 12 months, and it was taken after the Melbourne City's women's team won the W League Grand Final in 2020. And there's obviously a few familiar faces in this photo: Steph Catley and Ellie Carpenter in the front row, and Emily Van Egmond as well. And I always talk about that, without a doubt, working with 8 of the Matildas selected for last year's World Cup was by far the highlight of my professional career. And I can still remember when they were playing with Melbourne City in front of 50 people on a Wednesday night, on an oval near Melbourne Airport, to see them receive all the accolades that they deserve for all their hard work, not only for their entire careers, but for what they were able to do. And in the World Cup last year and capture a nation's attention was pretty special. So very much loved the work that I got to do with those athletes. And also very lucky, as I mentioned, to be working with the men's program. And during that period of time, we won 3 premierships in a row, which was just a fantastic achievement. Working with the Swans, unfortunately, I lost 3 grand finals. So nights like these are just incredibly special as well. Like I just touched on, last year I began tutoring at the University of Melbourne, and I was asked to guest lecture and present their sports dietetics subject, which was, another really great career highlight. I've obviously spent so much time at uni doing the Bachelor of Exercise Science and the Master of Dietetics. So to be on the other side of the table actually presenting was very much for me a full circle moment. So yeah, really, really enjoyed that. Cool. All right. And then from a personal experience, also lost 45 kilos in the past. And yeah, I'm a three-time marathon runner. So been very fortunate enough to have been able to complete the Melbourne Marathon, New York in 2019 with the Venture Time Travel. So that's how Anna and I first connected. And then the London Marathon in 2022. So fingers crossed, everything goes well over the next period of time, and I'll be a 4-time marathon runner after completing Chicago in October. So a few more extra photos. This was me, obviously 45 kilos heavier. So yeah, a lot of change, both physically and mentally as well, has taken place over sort of the last 12 years. But yeah, I love being able to show people this photo. Like I alluded to, I'm a 3-time marathon runner. And I also love sharing my times for these 3 marathons. So my gut feel is that a lot of people that were attending or being involved with Adventure Time Travel, this will be their first time completing a marathon. So I really like to highlight and sort of allude to the fact that I don't really tell people that I'm not a runner, or sorry, that am a runner, I should say. And I know you might have seen Anna talk about her film, I Am a Runner. I think that's what it's called, or I'm not a runner. Now I'm confusing myself. But I'd highly recommend everyone watching that. It's just such a fascinating insight into the role of marathon running for people that might not necessarily think that they were capable. So, I imagine that a lot of people watching this are all pretty similar in terms of not being professional runners. And it's simply for us about giving our best and getting better with each run, and simply enjoying the entire experience, both through the training and then on race day. So let's sort of begin to talk about some sports nutrition principles. I tried to show this video, and I'm not too sure if it'll work again, but we'll discuss it afterwards in case you can't hear the audio. But at the same time, there are subtitles for this as well. And so the general question that was asked there was, what's more difficult, a half marathon or a marathon? So it was alluded to the fact that a half marathon might be more difficult because of the speed involved. However, a marathon, the difficulty of a marathon comes down to fueling. And the quote there that I just absolutely love and resonate with is, if you were training for a marathon, before you even worry about the shoes, the glasses, the clothes, your times, you need to go figure out your nutrition. And I showed this image a lot when I was working within soccer, but I think it's also as applicable for marathon runners as well. And the key being there that nutrition plays an important part of so many other variables, including not only fueling, but recovery and sleep and injury risk, which is really important when we're training for 12-week long just training plans, I should say. Immune function, given that we're all training in the middle of winter as well, so trying to avoid illness, and cognitive function as well, which becomes super important in the last 5 to 10 kilometers of a marathon, where we're not all in the best frame of mind, you could say, and more often not in a dark place. So yep, another reason why nutrition is just super important for all those different factors. In terms of presentation for today, I've decided that I'm going to be focusing on carbohydrates as the main priority. We could talk about any of the other things that make up the nutrition puzzle, as I like to call it, but carbohydrates is definitely the most important component that I feel, and so we'll be discussing that in depth today. as well as fluid and the importance of hydration and avoiding dehydration as well, given that has the ability to really impact performance. So first and foremost, fueling and the idea of choosing the right fuel. So when we're choosing the right fuel, it's got a positive effect on performance, recovery, energy levels, injury prevention, and immune system function, like I talked about, as well as sleep. On the flip side of that, when we're choosing the wrong fuel, it has the ability to impact all of those things. So, you know, from a performance perspective, that idea of concentration and endurance becomes reduced as well. From a recovery perspective, it impacts our readiness to train, meaning we can't do the load required to be able to train properly for a marathon. We might get injured, we might become sick. Our recovery is significantly impacted by our lack of sleep, given that's when your body regenerates overnight. So all those factors are negatively reduced as a result of choosing the right fuel. And I like to think that, you know, in the same way of when we go to a service station to fill up our cars, we're always making a choice about what fuel we can be putting either into the human body or into our vehicle. So, you know, that idea that a Toyota Corolla is the most popular car in the world today, and we've got the option when we go to the servo that we can put unleaded diesel or auto gas into that. And for most Toyota Corollas out there, they're going to be functioning on unleaded fuel. So, you know, that idea that that's the one fuel we should put in the car, and the idea that diesel and auto gas will really impact the ability for that car to run or move. On the flip side of that, you know, a Hino 300 is the most popular truck. And similarly, when we, or if you were to be driving a truck, you've got three options of what fuel you could be putting into that vehicle. Once again, unleaded diesel and auto gas. Typically for trucks, they run on diesel. So that concept, I should say, that if you're not putting diesel into the truck, it's not going to function correctly. You know, moving on to arguably the greatest marathon runner of all time, he also has a choice about what he can put into his body in terms of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And ultimately, it makes sense for him to be focusing on carbohydrate as his main fuel source. I'm also not suggesting that proteins and fats aren't important, but ultimately it's the carbohydrate content that's going to really impact and have a positive effect on marathon runners. And here's just a little photo of Kipchoge and I, and yeah, very fortunate enough to have been able to meet him at a Nike event leading up to the London Marathon, and just the aura around him. It was a week after he broke the world record in Berlin, and yeah, just fantastic to meet him. And I'm sure a lot of people are really looking forward to seeing him race in the marathon of the Olympics next weekend. So let's talk about carbohydrates. And I always say, you know, if you were to take one thing out of this presentation, it's that concept that carbohydrates are energy foods. So really important. So why are carbohydrates important? And ultimately, that's because carbohydrates are the body's preferred source of energy. They're found in foods such as pasta, rice, bread, fruit, and vegetables, and depending on the dairy product, can be found in milk and yogurts too. And then from a sports-specific component, they can be found in things like energy gels or lollies and sports drinks too. When should carbohydrates be prioritized? Pre-exercise, because that's going to provide you the energy for the training. During exercise, because that's going to provide you energy during exercise, and that's only required if exercise is greater than 60 minutes. So we'll touch on that soon too. And also the idea of post-exercise, and that's to replace the energy used during exercise in the same way that, you know, when you run out of fuel in your car, you need to then fill that back up. So really important concepts, and let's look at those in more depth. So sort of touched on it before, carbohydrates, and particularly today's session is focusing on longer runs, so greater than 60 minutes in duration. And this is a table that was developed by Louise Burke, who's sort of the godmother of sports nutrition here in Australia, and broken it down into pre-exercise, during exercise and post-exercise situations, and when carbohydrates are required for those. So given that, marathon running is typically greater than 90 minutes of sustained exercise, carbohydrate loading becomes important. I'm sure everyone has heard about, consuming large amounts of pasta the night before because you've got to carb up. It's also important pre-event, so that idea of what to consume in specific situations where the exercise duration is greater than 60 minutes, so like what we've just talked about. And then also during ultra endurance exercise, so that idea of being, up to sort of 3 hours of exercise, which is very then typical, or greater, I should say, sorry, than 2.5 to 3 hours of exercise, which is very typical of marathon running. And for most people watching this, probably a lot, well, I will definitely be running greater than 3 hours on marathon day. Cool. So once again, broke that down, and putting a time marker to that as well now. So the idea of a carbohydrate-based load, and we should be implementing that 36 to 48 hours prior to exercise. The concept of a carbohydrate-based meal, and when we should be consuming that 3 to 4 hours prior to exercise. A carbohydrate-based snack, and when we should be consuming that 1 to 2 hours prior to exercise. And the idea then of a carbohydrate-based primer, which we should be consuming every 30 minutes of exercise. And we'll get into the first one of those, which is a carbohydrate load. So what I've done, the easiest way to sort of talk about a carbohydrate load is to look at the week on a piece of paper. So that idea of Monday to Sunday, and then using my long run today as the example for this. So, my long run, I penciled in on Sunday at 10 a.m. So knowing then what the science says is that we need to work back sort of 48 hours from that. So that would take us to 10 a.m. on Friday. And then from there, all I've done is extend that a little bit to breakfast. So really focusing on beginning our carbohydrate load from breakfast on a Friday. The next step then is to put in all our meals and snacks, and typically most people will have 3 main meals and 3 snacks. So I include that for Friday and Saturday, and it just allows us to really begin that planning process of what our nutrition looks like 48 hours in advance from a long run. Cool. So moving on to the next one, which is the carbohydrate meal. And this is the breakfast, lunch, and dinner that I talked about. So really easy concept for people to grasp. And that's the idea, if the red circle is reflective of a white dinner plate, so making sure that 50% of your plate is made up of predominantly carbohydrate-based food sources. So the idea, again, of those pastas and rices and breads, is really important. We're also including a portion of lean protein. So once again, that can be animal-based or plant-based, depending on your food preferences, and including a serve of fruits and vegetables as well, given that they're typically associated with all our vitamins and minerals, all our antioxidants. So a really important component of overall health. So looking at a balanced plate consisting of 50% carbohydrates, 25% protein, and 25% fruit or vegetables. Some examples of that, pasta is obviously a really popular one. So something like a chicken pasta or a teriyaki chicken, oats, which, a lot of people do enjoy, given that it's probably the more breakfasty option on there. Hand rolls are a fantastic and easy takeaway option as well. And then also some people don't really like consuming too much even before they run. I always tell these people that it's really important, but if you can't feel like you consume a pasta or a rice dish, then even just something like a simple sandwich means that you're at least getting a decent source of carbohydrates in there. So that's the food component of a meal, but also the beverages play another significant part, given that's going to allow you to top up on your carbohydrate stores. So I tend to save the sports drinks for closer to the event. So then something like a soft drink or something like a juice is going to be really beneficial to be able to top up on your glycogen, also your stored carbohydrate sources too. Going through my photos from when I was running the London Marathon, and I came across this. So this was my dinner 2 days before the London Marathon, just in my hotel room. So trying to fit those principles again of having some sort of carbohydrate as the main. So in this instance, I've got I think that was a pasta and chicken dish. Incorporating then as well fruits and vegetables, because that becomes really important. So I had some watermelon, and then paired that with a soft drink as well. And these were at the time just what was available from the supermarket across the road from the hotel. Another photo from my time running London Marathon was the breakfast the day before the London Marathon. So, you can see there quite clearly that 50% of the plate is made up of the bread component. I've also got a carbohydrate source from the oats in the bowl with some sort of yogurt there, so another form of carbohydrate and protein source as well. Obviously fruit and some jam, so that makes up the fruit and vegetable component. And then I've paired that with an orange juice. So, really high carbohydrate based dish, given that pretty much everything on the plate is a source of carbohydrate. Cool. So then the next concept is the idea of a carbohydrate-based snack. So like I touched on, we're looking to consume these 1 to 2 hours pre-exercise. And this can be anything from an English muffin with some jam, a slice of bread with some honey, a muesli bar, which are great options because they're not going to get damaged or spoiled in your backpack potentially, or then even just something like a simple banana. And pairing that with the first time with the sports drink as well. So that it then sort of almost says to your body in a way to really start expecting, some really high sources of carbohydrate. And that becomes important, given that we're still 10 weeks out well, in my instance, 10 weeks out from the Chicago Marathon. So we're trying to train our gut. So when we get to marathon day and we're starting to consume significant amounts of carbohydrates over a long period of time, that our body's already used to that. So once again, choosing maybe one of those 4 options, and there could be another number of options out there, and pairing that with the sports drink too. So that's the carbohydrate snack, and we're looking to have that 1 to 2 hours pre-exercise. And the next one's the carbohydrate primer, and this is what we should be consuming sort of every 30 minutes during exercise. And there's a number of ways that you can meet this. So something like an energy gel or Cliff Blocks are really popular, and that's moving more into the sports supplement space. Something like 5 jelly babies as well, and then looking to pair that, I should say, with 300 mils of a sports drink, or half the bottle of a sports drink. And the reason for this is we're trying to meet 90 grams of carbohydrates every hour. And that's what the science suggests is best practice. So, if we're then having these every half an hour, it means that we're going to be consuming, if it was an energy gel paired with 300 mils of a sports drink, that's roughly 40 grams of carbohydrates. So if we're doing that twice in the hour, that gets us to 80 grams of carbohydrates. And, if we're turning that into a percentage, that's 88%. So, which means we're pretty much meeting our carbohydrate requirements, which is great. So anything less than that, it really opens ourselves up at the end of the marathon to be really fatigued and lack energy, which we're obviously trying to avoid. So that concept of, needing to consume 90 grams per hour of carbohydrate can be quite difficult, which is why we then need to practice that in advance and be really on top of our nutrition. And this is looking at, a variety of energy gels. So for me, energy gels are the number one preference, and I should say for a lot of marathon runners as well. And that's for a number of reasons that are listed there. So a quick source or a great source of 22 grams of carbohydrate. They begin to be absorbed in the mouth, which is fantastic because that allows us the carbohydrate high that a lot of marathon runners get, given that the mouth is in close proximity to the brain. They're easily portable. So, when I completed the London Marathon, I had 8 gels on me. No chewing is required. So say not necessarily a banana of some sort, which means they can be rapidly consumed, and that has the potential to reduce, GI discomfort, or prevent having an upset stomach, knowing that no food needs to really be broken down inside the stomach. So all the blood can then just go to our legs, given they're going to be doing a lot of the movement over a 3, 4, 5 hour period, depending on how fast you are and looking to do your marathon in. So that's all brands of gels. So 3 popular ones there being SIS, Morton, and Goo. And the brand specific ones, depending on what brand, I prefer the SIS because they meet the criteria for those 4 things of not requiring water. They are available in a variety of different flavors. You can buy ones that contain caffeine, and I'm not going to touch on caffeine too much today, but you can buy gels that contain caffeine, and they're third-party batch tested, which means they're suitable for elite athletes. So given my role as a sports dietitian, that becomes really important too, and using really trusted brands is incredibly beneficial for athletes. So it's just an overview of energy gels and their importance. All right, well, that's pretty much the carbohydrate-based component. So let's now move on to hydration. And the guy on the right is Klaus. So if you're not familiar with Klaus, you should definitely YouTube him. He's Kipchoge's right-hand man, and is the guy that delivers him all his nutrition products during a race. And it's hilarious when they have a successful exchange. Klaus starts fist pumping because he's done his job. But ultimately, he allows Kipchoge to meet his carbohydrate and hydration requirements, which is obviously super important at that really high elite level space. So the reason that hydration is important is or necessary, and that's because it replaces the fluids and electrolytes, i.e. sodium, that's lost in sweat. So the concept of sweating cools the body down. So when we have increased sweat, we have increased fluid loss and increased electrolyte loss. And fluid losses greater than 2% are associated with a decrease in concentration, decision-making, in terms of running specific endurance capacity and running velocity. So obviously things that we don't want to be decreasing as we're, completing a marathon. And then you also have an increased risk of cramping and an increased risk of injury as well. And that concept of hitting the wall, is what ultimately marathon runners are trying to avoid. And fluid losses are impacted by temperature, humidity, wind, exercise intensity, and clothing. And that can be really important when we're comparing something like the Chicago Marathon, which is going to be run during, I think it's still going to be the beginning of winter, so October in the Northern Hemisphere. And for those people that completed the Sydney Marathon, I think it was in 30 to 40 degree weather last year, which is just ridiculous. So that concept of needing to consume more fluids when it is hotter, we won't necessarily have to worry about if you're doing the Berlin, Chicago, or New York Marathon, for example. And in terms of calculating your baseline fluid requirements, and that's on a non-training day, all you have to do is multiply 35 by your weight. So I believe I'm roughly 70 kilos, which means my baseline fluid requirements are going to be, 2.4, 2.5 liters of fluid every day, and then ultimately being more on days where I'm actually running. So on a non-training day, it's really easy for me to calculate because I just need to drink the same water bottle 3 times. So I might start drinking that at breakfast, I might refill it at lunch, consume that again, and then refill it at dinner and consume that before I go to bed. And that allows me to reach 2.4 liters of fluid. Cool. So let's work on the concept of practice making perfect. And I'm using my example of what to do for a long run and what I did this morning as part of that. So looking again at the idea of a carbohydrate-based load, a carbohydrate-based meal, carbohydrate-based snack, and carbohydrate-based primer, and how they're all connected. And let's jump into it. So we've already looked at this slide. So this was the carbohydrate-based load. So once again, the idea that I was doing a long run at 10 a.m. and working backwards 48 hours to then, which would have taken me to 10 a.m. Friday. And then I've just adjusted that to having breakfast at 8 a.m. Cool. So that's a carbohydrate-based load, done and dusted, pretty basic. The next one is the carbohydrate-based meal, and that's 3 to 4 hours prior to exercise. So in my concept again, knowing that I was going to do a long run at 10 a.m., I got up at 6, which wasn't too early for me, and that's when I would have my carbohydrate-based meal. So if we look at the slide for that I showed previously, it's probably, I didn't necessarily feel too inclined to want to have a pasta or a rice-based dish at 6 in the morning. So chose the oats with fruit and yogurt, and then paired that with a orange juice as well. And another reason why that's a really great breakfast option is because when they posed the question to Kipchoge about what did you eat for breakfast before the Berlin Marathon, which was when he broke the world record, his answer was oatmeal. And that's a fantastic choice for these reasons. And I sort of touched on that before. So being that oats is a source of carbohydrate, the blueberries and the strawberries and the banana being a source of carbohydrate, honey being a source of carbohydrate, and depending on the dairy product, the milk and yogurt that people tend to consume with their porridge, or oats, I should say, may contain carbohydrate with that as well. So fantastic way to get a variety of different carbohydrate-based food sources into the one meal. Cool, so there's my meal. Change that over to oats with orange juice. And that's my snack. Sorry, that's my meal. Moving on to the carbohydrate-based snack, and knowing then that I need to be consuming that 1 to 2 hours pre-exercise. So, knowing that my long run, again, was at 10 a.m., meaning that I was looking to have that at the 8 a.m. mark. So here's the slide. For me, I just have a humble banana, keep it really simple, really great source of carbohydrate. And this is when I begin the Gatorade consumption as well. So, knowing that the snack is then at 8 a.m., having the banana and Gatorade. Cool. And then finally moving on to our primer. So knowing that we need to have that every 30 minutes. So for me, energy gels, I'm really quite comfortable with that. So pairing that with 300 mils of the sports drink. And I put this table together so to allow people to sort of count how many primers that they do require depending on the exercise duration. So for me, knowing that my long run today was approximately 2 hours, it meant that I needed to have one sort of 15 minutes before I started, and then 3 during the run as well. So a really great resource there as well, just to count how many primers you actually need depending on your level of exercise. So back to our little table, knowing that my long run then was consisting of 4 primers, and then I've just put in 1 gel and 1 cup of sports drink for all of those. Cool. So that's what I did for my long run. It went well today, but when I completed the London Marathon, it didn't necessarily go as well. So I put together, it was obviously fresh in my mind, immediately after the event, of the concept of what went wrong. So there was a lot of things that went wrong for me during the London Marathon, and a fantastic learning experience, and trying to avoid a hell of a lot of them going wrong again in Chicago later this year. So I've highlighted the ones in pink text of the ones that were directly related to poor nutrition. So first and foremost, poor overnight sleep and morning GI upset. And that was mainly for 2 reasons. So I went to the soccer, and it's probably not the best thing to do, the night before a marathon, but went to the soccer the night before the marathon, and that was a night game. And, when you typically go to sporting events, the only foods they really serve are really deep fried, heavy fat-based foods, chips, burgers, hot dogs, that sort of thing. And I obviously didn't want that, knowing that I needed to run a marathon the next day, but saw they had macaroni and cheese, and I was like, oh, cool, perfect. I need pasta, so I'll have pasta. The problem with that is, cheese is obviously really high in fat, and that doesn't sit well for some people in their stomachs. So I had a horrific night's sleep, coupled then with, being very anxious and of having butterflies in my stomach because of what I was going to be doing later that day in terms of running an event like the London Marathon. So it wasn't a good time for me. We saw in the photo earlier about I call it a pre-match meal, but what I had 3 to 4 hours prior, and I went to the buffet the day before the marathon, and obviously planned on what I was looking to have on marathon day, except discovered, because of how early the marathon was, that they prepared a breakfast for all the competitors, and that consisted of a croissant, which is really high in fat predominantly, I think it was an apple, and a mini juice. So very much not what I would typically have or recommend athletes have, volume wise. So here I was at 6 a.m. running around the streets of London, trying to find something good to eat. Nothing was available. I'm obviously already starting to sweat and panicking a little bit. So what I ended up doing was paying something ridiculous, like 10 to 15 pounds for 2 slices of toast with some jam. So I could have that on top of the fruit and then the juice that they had given me as well. So definitely not the best way to wake up on a marathon morning. The actual event was a little bit of a disaster as well, and that's because the London Marathon typically don't provide that much sports drinks out on the course. So I was only really meeting half of my carbohydrate requirements. So over a long period of time, that significantly impacted me. I felt really lethargic and fatigued and had no energy. I've highlighted reduced social support in there as well, because I planned then for a friend to come and give me a bottle of Gatorade, just because of knowing that I wasn't getting that on the course. Or I should say, my phone battery died, so they weren't able to find me really easily on the course, and I didn't know where they were going to be, so there was no exchange of Gatorade to me. And then I started developing pins and needles in my hands, so that was signs that I was beginning to hit the wall. And I also then because I wasn't consuming as much, and I had a bit of a GI upset, that led to dehydration as well. So a number of those things could have just been easily avoided. And knowing that I have the chance to right those wrongs in Chicago, is what really excites me about running a fast time as well, knowing I won't have the same problems again. On the flip side, though, what I'm most proud of is that idea that I just never stopped running. My time obviously wasn't as great as what I was hoping, but nonetheless, just kept putting one foot in front of the other, and made it to the end. And that medal that I'm holding in that photo is one of my most proudest possessions, and that concept that no one can ever take that away from me. So my not so great experience of the London Marathon. And just to finish up, I thought I'd give you some really just great 3 small top tips. Number 1, start incorporating gels, lollies, and sports drinks into all of your upcoming runs before the marathon. And that's really for 2 main reasons. So number 1, it just will ensure that you're actually fueling correctly for each run. And number 2, we're practicing what's called training our gut. So it just gives us the opportunity to reduce the most amount of discomfort we may have in our stomachs on marathon day. And that becomes really important when you're consuming 7, 8, 9 energy gels or Cliff Blocks or lollies on the day, and just knowing that your body can handle that significant amount of really simple sugars is really important. So number 2, completing a nutrition planner, and I'll send Anna a copy of a blank template you can all use to fill out yourself. And this is an example of what that looks like. So putting in the starting time of your exercise and the exercise duration, then working backwards from there. So we've already touched on pre-exercise meal and having that 3 to 4 hours prior to exercise, pre-exercise snack, having that 1 to 2 hours prior, and the exercise primer, so having that immediately prior to commencing exercise, and then a number of times during exercise as well. So this is what mine would have looked like if I was looking to fill that out today. So my long run at 10 a.m. and that was going to last 2 hours. I was going to get up at 6 a.m. and have oats, yogurt, and honey with some berries and some orange juice. My pre-exercise snack was then going to take place at 8 a.m. and that was going to consist of a banana and Gatorade. And then knowing then that I needed 1 gel and 300 mils of sports drink 4 times. So once at 9:45, so just that 15-minute window prior to commencing, and then 3 times during my exercise. So at 30 minutes, 1 hour, and then an hour and a half. And my third tip is just have fun. And there's this really great quote, in case no one told you, the training is the marathon and the race is a celebration. And I just love that concept. I think it can be really difficult to, feel like you're doing enough. And I've definitely experienced that in a number of my earlier marathons as well. Getting up, in the middle of winter, winter morning, I should say, to get some long runs in, or getting up at 6 a.m. because you need to do your training before you go to work. And that can be really difficult to do in the middle of winter. So definitely enjoy the process. The thing that I love about adventure time travel as well is, and it just creates a really great sense of community. I'll be running Chicago Marathon with one of my best friends as well. So, we're just constantly encouraging each other. And yeah, it's that idea of just enjoying the entire experience. For a lot of people, they might only ever run one marathon in their life. So if you don't enjoy that process, well, you'll never get the opportunity potentially to do it again. So very much just enjoy everything that takes place over the next few weeks and months. This is the point in the workshop where I would have opened it up to the floor. So here are all my contact details if anyone wants to reach out, readily available. And then as well offering a 25% discount for all Adventure Time Travel marathon runners. So if that's something you want to explore, please reach out. If you've got a simple question as well that you'd like me to answer, please reach out as well. But yeah, enjoy the next few months. And thank you so much for your time.